Good morning, everyone, and welcome into another edition of WST Sunday Live. My name is Connor Hrabchak. As always, today I'm joined by Lyss, Houde, and this is WST Sunday Live, January 5th edition. The Jets coming off of 3 straight losses. A lot to talk about last night, most notably the 4-2 loss to the Detroit Red Wings. But before we get into all of that, Lyss, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's definitely 9 o'clock in the morning, but you know what? I had a great night last night because I got to spend it with everybody at the Jets game, so we had a really good time. And yeah, looking forward to talking about it, even if the result was not the ultimate one that the Winnipeg Jets were looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was a great crowd there inside the building. A lot of Red Wings fans, as you would expect, with any original six opponent coming to town. And the Jets got off to a bit of a slower start, I'd say. Especially in that first period. I think both Arneal and Josh Morrissey admitted that in the post game. And then the second and third period looked a lot better from the Jets' perspective, and they kind of clawed back into the game, but it was too little, too late. Let's start with the Colin Miller injury, because this was a bit of a scary one. It took a puck to the throat, Scott Arneal said. Let's start with Scott Arneal's comments on this, because you brought it up after I asked the question to him later, but he kind of alluded to a bit of like, we lost another defenseman now, so things are going to change again, I think was the quote. That wasn't in this clip that I'm about to play, but this could be something that makes Colin Miller miss time, which I didn't think was going to be the case. We saw Josh Morrissey take a puck to the face and come back later that period. This was obviously a lot more serious, more in the neck or throat area, and Colin Miller did not return. Here's what Scott Arneal had to say about first Miller and then how the defense corps handled going down to 5D, which it feels like they've had to do every other night for the past 2 weeks when someone goes out with an injury. So here's Scott Arneal.
As you saw there, you got the puck in the throat. So, yeah, pretty serious. We'll just wait and see. So it's got to get looked at here and a little bit more, and then we'll have some more idea, a little bit more of an idea tomorrow. So.
You've had to do a few times lately. What did you think of the way your D handled the 5D and the mix and match?
Yeah, it's obviously when you lose that, it's kind of like the Toronto game. Guys have to step up and play big minutes, and I thought they did a good job. I think that obviously the start of the game, you don't want to start having to try to kill 2 penalties that early, and then losing as we did that, we lost JMO right away. He was gone. He got hit with a puck. So kind of a lot of things happened in that first period, got us out of whack, but took over the second, took over the third. There's a lot of chances. We outchanced them. And that we had chances. We had some posts. We had some looks, but at the end of the day, it just obviously they came out on top.
So there it is, Scott Arneal on Colin Miller, the defense corps handling it, the game in general. Lyss, what were your initial thoughts when you saw Colin Miller take that puck to the throat, didn't return to the game? And then just touch on what Scott Arneal kind of alluded to there with how the 5 defensemen handled it the rest of the game. How did you think that they managed? Obviously, the Jets lost, but where did you think that the defense corps took it after Miller's injury?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like the players were kind of dropping like flies for a little bit there, like we said with Josh. And I think there was a point where Iafallo maybe blocked a shot, and he didn't miss a shift or anything like that, but I felt like these guys were getting pucks in places they didn't want to be getting pucks. But
yeah,
the Miller one in particular, right, you see that, and it was very strange if you missed the game or if you weren't watching as closely. Obviously, since we're in person, you can sort of fix your eyes on something if you'd like to, and you don't have to wait for a camera to pan to someone. But he was really clutching that neck area. I actually thought at first that perhaps he was bleeding in the same way that Josh was, because he was holding himself up in a way that looked like he was trying to contain something. But then he kind of limped off of the ice down the tunnel, and it took him a while to actually get into the dressing room. We could see through from where we sit in the press box, you could see the tunnel there, and he spent a little bit of time there. And at first I thought perhaps he was winded, because if you get a puck in that area, that's definitely a possibility, same way as getting like a puck in the stomach, right, where it's just you need a minute to breathe. But getting a clear puck right to the throat, that can't be comfortable. So I'm wishing him the best. And yeah, like you said, the D-corps had to manage basically the rest of the game without him. And based on the comments from Scott, just trying to read into the body language a little bit, same thing from Cole Perfetti, I think the guys were pretty freaked out by what happened there. It definitely wasn't a comfortable moment for the team there. So it was nice to see them kind of rally together in that second period there. But I thought the defense was okay. 5 defense is never anything ideal, and this is getting down to pretty low in the depth charts for Winnipeg Jets defensemen, lower than we've seen in the last couple of seasons, really. Like, this is not quite COVID era Winnipeg Jets here, but we're starting to get there in terms of what they want, right? This is the 8th defenseman, the 9th defenseman, right? Because guys have been out. And did they all have a stellar game yesterday? No, I wouldn't say that necessarily, but I thought Josh Morrissey in particular really rallied and played a little bit of that style of game we can see him do sometimes when he puts the game on his back a little bit. Ville Heinola, I don't think, had a super awesome game, but, you know, when you're only down 5D, you kind of have to give guys their leash, and I thought he had some really nice looks, especially after that tough goal from Alex DeBrincat that he didn't manage perhaps as well as he might have liked to. And in particular from him, the last thing I'll say before we kind of move on and I give you a chance to speak instead of monologuing here is that I thought yesterday was one of the first times in a while that I've seen a little bit more offensive upside from Ville Heinola in a game in the sense of, you know, moving a little bit more north-south in the D zone, or pardon me, in the offensive zone, and being a little bit more activated up there, which is part of his kind of competitive advantage and part of the sell of that player. So that's exciting to see if he can unlock that a little bit. I think that would be a really nice add to his game and bring him up to the level that he wants to be. You know, I don't think is very pleased with necessarily how he's been playing. He's fine with it, but he knows he needs to do more to secure a spot as guys, especially those left defensemen, start getting healthier. So that's kind of my TLDR on the 5D from yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're now at the point where 3 regulars in the Jets' top 6 that they would play if everyone was healthy are now out, in Miller, Fleury, and Samberg. I was writing down notes from last night's game because I wasn't in Winnipeg for the past week. So I was focusing a lot on last night's game because that was going to dominate the show. I didn't really watch the games while I was away. But I wrote down in my notes, like, the defense core, it's coming more and more evident that that's going to be the place that they upgrade. And I had to stop myself because there was a time where Logan Stanley was the top left-hand defenseman for the Winnipeg Jets last night for an extended period of stretch because Josh Morrissey took the puck to the face. He missed, I want to say, like 8 minutes of the first period, like a good chunk. Logan Stanley played over 9 minutes in that first period as the leading time on ice player for the Winnipeg Jets. And I had to, that's when I wrote it down. I had to be like, okay, wait, the Winnipeg Jets are not planning for Logan Stanley to lead the team in time on ice in any scenario going forward, right? So any take about like, oh, this shows that the defense core needs an upgrade. This wasn't the plan. Samberg, Miller, and Morrissey a little bit last night, and then Fleury, obviously, all were missing time a little bit. Yeah, Gregory Liverpool saying it was 11 minutes that Josh Morrissey missed with that puck to the face. So it is concerning, and you are kind of seeing what the Jets have. And honestly, this is a really good scenario because they're still first in the NHL or near the top. I actually haven't checked the standings after last night's loss, but they're still near the top of the league, and they're kind of finding out what they have in Logan Stanley, in Ville Heinola. And last night was maybe a night where what you're finding out about these players is that you will need to upgrade for the playoffs, and you will need Hayden Fleury to be a guy on that third pair. But again, I'm not going to take last night and be like, oh, the Jets defense core is like Logan Stanley was supposed to be the 7th defenseman coming into the season, or the 6th defenseman, and he was the top left-hand D for an 11-minute stretch last night. That's too far removed from making a take about it. So the defense core was really, really banged up. But like Scott Arniel and Josh Morrissey said after the game, despite Colin Miller not returning for the last 2 periods, the Jets dominated the second and third. And funny enough, Lyss, I was telling you this last night. I asked you to guess what the high danger chances were at 5-on-5 without looking, because this was
I fumbled, guys. I guessed horribly. Just FYI.
Honestly, if I would have guessed, I would not have guessed this either. But the shot or the high danger chances last night at 5-on-5 were 15-3 for the Winnipeg Jets. I need to rewatch the game and kind of see that again, because I believe the 3 high danger chances only for Detroit. A lot of their chances came on the power play. They scored twice on the power play, and I feel like that's where they were generating a lot of their offense. At 5-on-5, they weren't really getting much. But for Winnipeg, 15 high danger chances at 5-on-5. I know they hit the post a lot, but some of those came on non-high danger chances too, like the Perfetti first post and the second post were both shots from pretty far away that just rung iron. So I don't know. What did you see from the Jets in the second and third period specifically? Because all the players in the post game and the coach alluded to the back 40 as their best hockey of the evening, and the stats kind of showed it. 15 to 3 5-on-5 chances, and that the majority of those came in the second and third period as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, this is a perfect example of how not all wins and losses are created equal in the NHL. And there have been times, where the Winnipeg Jets have played stretches of 3 games and won all 3 that I think they've looked worse than they have in this Colorado, Anaheim, Detroit stretch here, right? I didn't think this was horrible hockey from the Winnipeg Jets by any means whatsoever. And it's all about quality over quantity. And that's kind of the mantra of the Winnipeg Jets, and it has been for years. The Winnipeg Jets will win the expected goals battle in games where they get outshot pretty frequently, right? And that's by design. That is not a fluke. That is not an accident. They are okay with, and this is how, if I were a coach, this would be my philosophy as well. Like, you can pepper Connor Hellebuyck from the outside all you want. I do not care. If we're not giving you inside ice, if we're not allowing you to take those slot shots, like we'll allow those primary chances from outside all day. We're not going to take them, though. We are not going. That's not a priority for us, and we'd rather cycle the puck for a few seconds and wait for the optimal shot to come instead of just throwing some stupid outside shot from the goal line that's going to go in 3% of the time, right? So this was another example of that from the Winnipeg Jets. Most of the different sites that you look at that have publicly available stats from in-game metrics have the Winnipeg Jets dominating that game pretty heavily, even though they were outshot something like 16-4 or whatever it was in the first period, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's really important to kind of take everything with a grain of salt. Is that ideal? No, because luck happens all the time. We saw with a couple of posts from the Winnipeg Jets yesterday, right? Any of those 16 shots could have gone in, depending on, if something gets tweaked, and some of them did, right? So it's important to kind of balance that, but I wasn't displeased with the Winnipeg Jets performance yesterday. It definitely would have been nice to have, hear some crazy insights, see a couple more goals. But all in all, I think this stretch, 3 losses, this is not the same kind of second half fall off or whatever that we can allude to with the Winnipeg Jets in the last couple of years or anything like that. Like, I'm not my worry has not changed based on these 3 games. I still have the same worries about this team that I did, a few weeks ago. They haven't changed. They exist, but these 3 games aren't making me sound any alarms.
Yeah, me as well. I'd agree with that. And Ian Wilson's asking, what's the timeline for Samberg's return? We don't have a concrete timeline from Scott O'Neill, but Samberg has begun skating with the Jets in a non-contact jersey. The Jets are going to practice tomorrow, and Samberg had been skating at morning skates in non-contact jerseys where there isn't really contact anyways in a morning skate. But tomorrow's practice will be really interesting because if Samberg's able to maybe shed the non-contact jersey, wear a regular jersey, take some contact, take some hits and some drills, maybe I think there's an outside chance we see him Tuesday night against the Predators, but I think it's more likely we see him over the weekend. The Jets have a back-to-back at home Friday night against the Kings and Saturday against the Avs. I think it's more likely that we see Samberg maybe not play both of those games because you don't want to bring him back and then just play 2 games in a row and back-to-back nights, but I think you'll see him in one of those games. That's just a guess. He has started skating, but don't take that for a concrete timeline for Dylan Samberg. Is this the January slide that we've seen so many years? You said no. I'm going to agree. I think this team with the special teams last night kind of failed them, which was weird. We haven't seen that very often with this Jets team. I will say that the concerns, like you said, for me are always that this team isn't generating enough at 5-on-5. If the power play ever were to go cold, there's not really that sustainability of generating enough at 5-on-5. And we saw that last night where the power play went 0 for 2. Detroit's power play went 2 for 3. And ultimately they dropped this one. I want to get to Josh Morrissey's comments because he talked about how the team played a little bit better in the second and third period. Obviously, he played the majority of the second and third period after missing part of the first, and how special teams failed them. Here's Jets defenseman Josh Morrissey.
I mean, I think, in the second and third period, and I missed a lot of the first period, so I didn't see it. But in the second and third, we had the ice tilted a lot towards their end. They had a better start to the third, but I thought we did some good things. And, the end of a 5 and 8 days stretch, that's where your margins for error are smaller when maybe there's some fatigue. And, that's where you just, we need, special teams to step up, obviously, on the power play or PK, and sometimes that can be the difference. But just little details in a game like that where, we're at the end of a good stretch of tough stretch of hockey schedule wise, and we just need to find a way.
So there it is, Jets defenseman Josh Morrissey on their play last night, and he did reference the schedule there. The Jets are coming off of a 5 games in 8 days stretch, and now they're going into a bit of a lighter stretch. As I said, they only play the game on Tuesday, and then they have the back-to-back on Friday and Saturday. So only 1 game from now until next Friday. I asked Scott O'Neill about the rest advantage that they're going to get after that tough stretch of hockey after last night's game. Here's what he had to say.
1 game in the next 5 days. How can you guys kind of use that rest as an advantage?
I told him that's the big thing. Just rest. I get it. Make sure that we look after ourselves. Once they do get some rest, we can get some off-ice work in there. We'll throw some of that in, then, get a couple of practices where we get to get some touches that aren't morning skates where it's limited, or it's, the situations where we can't even skate at all. So just the biggest thing for us is we need some people to get healthy. Lost another defenseman, so that's going to change things again.
So there it is, Scott O'Neill. And right at the end there, he said, we lost another defenseman, so that's going to change things again. Which I don't know if he meant to say that. I don't know if he didn't really mean it. I don't know if that means anything at all. As we sit here with two days to go before a game and a practice, we'll know. But it was interesting to say that, because initially I played the clip right off the top of the show that Colin Miller, he said that they'll have to reevaluate him. But it's going to be interesting to see if Miller has to miss any time with this, because he's been kind of a player that you can put on the third pair, and there's been some stability there. When Stanley and Heinola have been on the third pair, you can't really say the same. So that will change things. And maybe Dylan Coughlin gets in the game on Tuesday, which I know a lot of Jets fans have liked the limited sample we've seen from him as well. So we will see, and a lot of the news will come out practice tomorrow. But let's move off of the defense core. The Jets also tweaked their lines last night a little bit, and I have a take as to why they did this. Scott O'Neill mentioned in the postgame why they did this, but I want to get your take. They flipped Ehlers and Vilardi. So the top line was then Connor, Scheifele, Ehlers. Second line was Perfetti, Lowry, Vilardi, which, because Lowry was started on the second line, we saw that late in the Anaheim game. Nemesikov's on the third line between Niederreiter and Iafallo. Just a barrage of new lines, which is crazy for this team. We haven't seen new lines. What do you think of those, that kind of new look top line? Obviously the Jets moved it back, but flipping Ehlers up to the top line, putting Vilardi with Perfetti and Lowry, the third line of Nemestikov, Niederreiter, Iafallo. What have you thought of that kind of new look that the Jets had last night?
I think I'm encouraged by it in a couple different ways. First and foremost, just the idea of changing is important, and this is something that we've always wondered if this team is willing and able to do, right? And I think that first line right now, in my opinion, kind of leads to the worries, right? They've been playing some pretty good hockey. I haven't seen any particular signs from them that make me feel like they desperately need a long-term shakeup or anything like that. But if I'm Scott O'Neill and I'm not liking what I'm seeing in that first period, run something different. And I think not only was the problem identification accurate, because you're right, they weren't generating anything in that period. I think the choices of how to solve it were also good, because those are both of the things that you need to kind of nail those things. And so sometimes we see, the Winnipeg Jets are like, oh yeah, we're not XYZ, and then they choose ABC to answer it. It's like, whoa, that was not the right call, right? So the Lowry switch, I can start with that one. Sure. I think is the logic of that one makes sense to me. Scott O'Neill, and that's what I mean by that, spoke to the media after the Anaheim game in regards to that, and he just mentioned the idea of having the wingers on that line spend a little bit more time with the puck. Yeah, super fair. That's the right way to do that, in my opinion. I don't, flip the ice to try and get more ozone starts or anything like that. Whatever, you bring in a guy who's not only a decent face-off guy, right, or whatever, but someone who forechecks really well, someone who is really strong with the puck on his stick, and also stylistically could play well with Ehlers and Perfetti, and also in a game and a stretch of games, if I may, where the Winnipeg Jets opponents are a little bit weaker. You do need to keep the Lowry, Niederreiter, something or other together, in my opinion, if you're going to be gluing them to the Nathan McKinnons and Connor McDavids of the world, right? And I don't necessarily think that someone like Perfetti is the right fit on a line like that. Velarde, maybe we'll get there, but that's not the point. So all that's to say, I think both the identification and the chosen solution there were interesting, as well as if you're looking to generate a little bit more offense from someone like Kyle Connor or Mark Scheifele or Gabe Velarde, any of the three of those guys, flipping one of them and putting Nikolai Ehlers with the other two is also the right call, in my opinion. I think that that's where you can get a little bit more dynamism and stuff. So I liked the decision. I also think they ran it for a good amount of time. They had a few shifts together and then they flipped it back. I'm okay with that. All in all, I was kind of pleased with what I saw from them. And the question is now just, will that idea come out when the stakes are high as well? Because the stakes were low and so you can mess around a little bit, but when the stakes are high, I think this Winnipeg Jets team likes to stick with what they know, and if what you know is not working, that's where I start to worry.
Yeah, it is interesting that we're here in January, and that was one of the first couple instances I can remember of this season where there was an in-game like flip of the lines. It's been a long time, and what I've found, the top line in this stretch since October 30th, since the last game against the Detroit Red Wings, which is always the barometer, because since then they've been on everything that you want the top line to be. They've outscored their opponents something like 25-12. They've been great. All of these games, like the Ottawa game is a great example from last Saturday, where the Jets kind of had a slow start. They were down in the second period, and then the top line just brought them back into it, gave them some life, scored on the power play, things like that. The Toronto game, the top line just absolutely carried. This was a night where you could see from the start, in my opinion, that the top line wasn't going to kind of reach that level. Like they weren't really building towards anything. They weren't generating much. So to do this switch, put Ehlers up there, kind of give that line a spark, hopefully generate some more offense. And then, yeah, I like the dynamic kind of created there with Perfetti, Lowry, and Velarde as three maybe slower players. Velarde and Lowry more dominant along the walls, Perfetti more dominant in space with passing. So I kind of like that dynamic as well. And obviously, I mean, they went to it for a period and then went back to it in the third. And I think that is the biggest thing with this, because you mentioned it. When the stakes are highest, when we're in the playoffs, it's going to be Connor Scheifele, Velarde, and they won't have really another look to go to. I mean, you have the Ehlers to the top line option, but like we saw last night, they weren't even comfortable going with it for 2 periods in a row against the Detroit Red Wings in January. Even when it worked, I mean, they scored a goal, right? Like Josh Morrissey scored at 5-on-5 to make it 2-1, and they went back to it to start the third when they were down. So
it's weird though, because it's different than what we've seen in the past, where I'll have to forgive me because I don't know if it was you talking about this or Jacob or me, or it could be anybody, but just in the past, what we've seen is that the Winnipeg Jets top line has been struggling, and maybe the second line, the third line, the fourth line are playing well, and they're like, okay, we have to shake things up in order to get that first line going. Right now, it's kind of the opposite, where that first line is playing well, but you need to shake up the rest of the lineup. And so in a game where they're not firing on all cylinders, all of a sudden you're playing a bit more like a basic hockey team where your top line is carrying and your others aren't. So when your top line doesn't carry, you bring out the blender or anything like that. What makes that difficult though is that when you're looking at switching things up or whatever, you know that you have that line to fall back on, and you think to a certain extent, it's like, okay, you can try something again, which is why I like the logic, whatever, but you know that the outcome, if you flip the lines back to what you have, is having the most dominant top line in the first line in the league, right? So if you know that that's kind of sitting in your back pocket, I understand being hesitant to want to leave things for too long, especially because like you said, you got to give it enough runway to see if it's working a little bit. Granted, I don't think it was really working yesterday. It just seemed to be a little bit of an off night for a lot of the guys on the team there. A couple of crazy passes and just some misreads and stuff like that kind of ended up being costly for them. But it's difficult when, in the past it's been, why not change things up, right? That's been what people have been screaming, right? Because it's like, the baseline, the norm is not nearly good enough. So like you have absolutely nothing to lose by changing things and by making changes, because what you have is poor, and it's you're giving up nothing by changing it, right? Right now the Winnipeg Jets are giving up something by changing it, which is a little bit of a different situation. So that's why I'm encouraged to see it, and why Yeah, I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see how it unfolds over the next 41 because there is a lot left to learn about this roster. But yeah, that's kind of why I feel encouraged by the line shakeup, just because we know how dominant that first line can be and has been in immediate recent samples.
And one of the things that I remember saying during training camp in the offseason when the Winnipeg Jets hired Scott Arniel is that in his short, I don't know, how many games did he coach last year? Less than 15 stretch. He changed the lines a lot. Excuse me. They put Ehlers on the top line a lot with Scheifele and Vilardi. They put Connor and Perfetti together. They would switch the lines going into the third period a lot. Like it was just, I don't know. Scott Arniel would change. Sorry, I'm going through a bit of a coughing attack here. But Scott Arniel would change the lines a lot in his limited sample last year. So to not see him do it until January this year, I know the top line has been, better. And since October 30th, one of the best lines in the league. But it is really interesting. Lyss, it is the midway point of the season as well. And I do want to get to that because it's easier to talk big picture when we are literally at the midway point of the season through 41 games. And you threw together this graphic, sent it to me last night. I'm going to bring it up. There are 9 players on pace for a career best in points for the Winnipeg Jets. We've got Kyle Connor on pace for 104, Mark Scheifele, 92, Nikolai Ehlers, 85, Perfetti, 46, Pionk, 56, Vilardi, 72, Lowry, 44, Samberg, 23, and Logan Stanley, 21. So where are you at with these 9 players, and what does this graphic kind of say to you about the midway point of the season and 9 players on pace for career best in points?
Well, it's exciting to me when you look at this and see that the Winnipeg Jets 5, maybe 6. Maybe we'll go all the way to 6. 6 best forwards are on pace for career best in point production, right? That's a good thing. And they have some guys in that group, for example, someone like Nino Niederreiter, who's playing great hockey right now, but is in a later stretch of his career where obviously he had some crazy seasons with different teams kind of ahead of him or anything like that. But these guys are not like, Kyle Connor's best point production season being only 93 points was a little bit surprising to me. Mark Scheifele 84 was even more surprising to me. I thought that was kind of wacky, not going to lie. But these paces are significantly higher for particularly those 4 forwards. The Cole Perfetti one I put a little bit less stock into because he's still so young. Adam Lowry I put a little less stock into because he doesn't get paid to score goals. But those 4 players who play on Winnipeg's power play unit and who play on that top line, the fact that they are continuously outpacing where their peak point production has been, not just their average or anything like that, is a good thing. Like that is encouraging for Jets fans. I think that's really awesome. I really would like to see a Winnipeg Jet break 100 points this year. That'd be awesome. We haven't seen that in a while. I think people should be encouraged by this. I think 41 games is a big enough sample to know that this isn't some fluky thing, but it's also just crazy to see how much things change when you have a power play that can produce, right?
Yeah, for sure. And the top unit, I mean, all the forwards on the top unit are on this list, right? Connor, Scheifele, Ehlers, Vilardi, and that has a massive, massive play in this because as the top unit in the NHL is scoring at the best rate, and you've seen this with Nikolai Ehlers. I mean, you see his career best at 64 points, and how long have people kind of been slamming the table for him to be on the top unit? And now he finally is. He's on pace for his career best in points in a pending UFA contract year. So really interesting stuff here. 9 players on pace for a career best in points. Obviously, the Jets near or at the top of the NHL in goals. So this makes sense. And I'd like to see Kyle Connor break 100 points. I think that would be very, very cool. And in the process, I think there's going to be that hunt for 50 goals as Kyle Connor's had a little bit over the past couple of years. Last year, he was on pace. As we've seen this year, he's on pace to kind of be around it. Last year was on pace. He had the knee injury, never really looked the same coming back. But I would love to see Kyle Connor maybe hit 50 goals, maybe hit 100 points and get to that level because that is just an elite level that we haven't really seen in a Winnipeg Jets uniform. So to see that from Kyle Connor when he is 1 year away from being eligible for an extension would be really interesting. And an interesting talking point as well for the Winnipeg Jets and their kind of management group on how they handle the Kyle Connor negotiations, because that will be an interesting one. I see a lot of people bringing up Cole Perfetti in the chat today, Lyss. He hit a few posts last night, but it's now 7 games without a point, and without a goal, of course. The game before that 7-game sample was one of his better games of the year, the 3-point night against the Minnesota Wild. He had a goal and 2 assists. Where are you at with Cole Perfetti right now as we kind of hit the midway point of the season? I mean, you saw it there. He's on pace for a career best in points. Last year, he was 2 until the second half slide and then got healthy scratch down the stretch. Where are you at with Cole Perfetti? Because I know the fan base is pretty divided on him as we sit here today.
Yeah, I mean, this is a player that I've liked what I've seen from for quite some time now, and I continue to like what I see from him just in terms of, kind of micro-analyzing when he's out there on the ice. I really like how he manages the puck. I really like, he had a couple of passes yesterday, one no-look pass he had. I was like, it was crispy. It was so nice. I think that there's a lot to like in that player. I understand the reservations about the player. I can't get on board with the he's too small. I can't get on board with the he's too streaky, whatever, because if we start being selective like that, everybody on the Winnipeg Jets has their moments for sure, right? So, but where I'm at kind of with this team is that I think they can configure this roster in a way that still uses Cole Perfetti and still allows him to play and play well. He struggled a little bit at 5-on-5 just in terms of like actually really generating stuff. So has Nikolai Ehlers, which is why I think, they've made that shift at center. But maybe this is the sort of outcome where you start running this team as a really heavy top line and third line team. And then you kind of have that sort of secret third thing, as in a skilled top 6, middle 6 sort of line that comes out against a little bit of an easier competition, whatever, and maybe just plays a little bit less at 5-on-5. We've talked about how the Lowry line is the second line for a lot of the season, and like, I'm fine with that. Like, I'm cool with this team sort of fluctuating their usage of players depending on how they're playing at the time. And it used to be that if you were to do that with Cole Perfetti, that would mean, Nikolai Ehlers not playing enough on 5-on-5, which the Jets desperately needed. I don't know if the Jets desperately need a lot of Ehlers at 5-on-5 right now. He's had a rough stretch here, and I'm not talking about 7 games like Cole Perfetti hasn't had a point, and I'm talking like 20. I'm talking like, since the explosion of that first line. Like Ehlers, he's on a power play merchant. I would never go that far, but he, like, you want to look at the microstats and production wise, like, not been his best sample of work at 5-on-5 in the last little bit. So I'm not giving up on Cole Perfetti, because if you watch the Winnipeg Jets, you shouldn't be giving up on Cole Perfetti. I think it's a little bit of a ridiculous take. And again, it's an inconsistent standard that he's the youngest player on this team by a significant margin. Other than someone like Ville Heinola, basically everyone else on this team is on the other side of 25, right? So it's very interesting to see that this is a player that everyone's kind of getting frustrated and giving up on, but also at the same time, I saw some comments yesterday. Lucas Raymond is the same age as Cole Perfetti, and that's where you start getting a little bit more of a valid criticism from me, right? Where it's like, okay, you can talk about how there's still room for him to grow. His best hockey is still ahead of him and all of those sorts of things. But right now he's playing one of the most important forward roles in this team. And if he can't produce, he can't produce. So I do understand where the argument is coming from. I just think that there's too much good that I see from this player to make me want him to play less. A lot of people are saying he needs to spend some time in the press box. I couldn't disagree more, but I understand that maybe there is some shakeups that could happen to make his usage a little bit more ideal.
Yeah, I am going to push back on that a little bit. I know that he's the youngest player on the team, but I just went and looked. 181 NHL games played. He's 23 years old. Like, I think these conversations we shouldn't be having about Cole Perfetti at this point in his career. We should be talking about how he's ascending into a full-time top 6 player, not this sheltered second line, secondary scoring line, maybe middle 6. Maybe he's really the third line winger, producing at a career best pace, but not really kind of really streaky. Like, these conversations about Cole Perfetti for a 10th overall pick from 5 years ago now, 4 years ago, if you count the drafts, is just, I think it's getting to the point. I understand why Jets fans are, their patience is kind of wearing out with Perfetti. Again, he's still on a pace for a career best in points. But yeah, all the talk about like trading him or benching him, I'm not there.
Yeah,
but I am in the camp that this is like let's go. Like, he's 23, he's played almost 200 career NHL games. Like, this should be the time when he's ascending, not kind of fizzling out.
But if you think about that draft class, like a lot of those guys, and like I'm not trying to blame COVID or anything like that, but a lot of those guys are still trying to figure it out. Like Alexi Lafreniere, Quentin Byfield,
True.
and like even like Jack Quinn. Like these are not guys. Like it's the exception as opposed to the norm to be a super meaningful, consistent NHL like player in this draft class right now. Like, yeah, there are guys who get NHL minutes, but in terms of like the domination that we see from guys like Tim Stützle is the exception in this draft class, right? Like where, like, I don't know, I have a little bit of patience just in terms of like 181 game, like that number was a little stark to me when you said that. That is a lot more, Ville Handel played his, what was it, 13th game of the season yesterday, and that's a career high for him. Like, so, Cole Perfetti doesn't have the same whiplash situation that Ville Handel does. But yesterday on Kenny and Rennie, they mentioned that, Rennie was pretty adamant that the best hockey he thinks he's ever seen from Cole Perfetti was after his benching last year. And he kind of had a little bit of a fire lit under his ass, right? Which I think is an interesting take. And I think it's hard for me to totally get on board with that take just because I, again, haven't disliked what I've seen from Cole Perfetti to the same extent that a lot of other people have. But I don't really know where I'm going with this. I don't really know if there's a takeaway from this conversation. I don't know if there's like an astute, like be all end all for what we want here, but
I don't think there is. Yeah.
It's just interesting. I do believe though that like in a competitive playoff NHL team, like you need to have top six players, and Cole Perfetti is playing more like a middle six player right now in terms of how much you'd want to see him out on the ice. So I understand why there could be some, calls for him to improve.
Yeah, and like obviously the fan base is going to take it to the extreme, want him traded for Elias Pettersson, everyone's saying in chat and all that stuff, right? I get it. I totally understand it. I'm just not there yet with Perfetti. I will say I am at the point where sooner rather than later, if this doesn't really turn around, it's time to not press box him, but maybe limit the ice time a little bit more. Like I would, like against LA and Colorado, you can't have Cole Perfetti kind of just like burning 14 minutes a night on that second line if that line's not doing anything. And since they already kind of ripped the Band-Aid off with Mason Appleton out of the lineup of breaking up the third line and the Niederreiter Lowry trio, I'd like to see Nino move up in Cole Perfetti's spot, and you can move Perfetti down. So I don't know. I think we're getting to that point where Cole Perfetti might see some discipline in terms of ice time reduction, maybe even I don't think they'll healthy scratch him. I really don't.
No. But again, the thing is like limiting his ice time, that used to be a problem for me because I was like, they're not going to put him with the Lowry line. And
so it's a fourth line.
He shouldn't go on the fourth line.
Right.
But limiting the second line's ice time means limiting Ehlers' ice time, and I don't like that. Now I'm fine. I'm okay with that, limiting Ehlers 5-on-5 ice time. So that's why I'm a little bit more on board with this take. But also yesterday, I think it was also Rennie who said he would be interested in seeing like Velarde and Niederreiter together. I'm good on that. I don't need to see that combo for wingers. I'm okay with that. But I think right now, you know what you have in the top line, and I'm not necessarily saying this is you go Buffalo Bills and say you're kind of keeping it in your pocket so you don't expose your threats or anything like that. But you know what they can do. I think this is a good time to sort of figure out what else other people can do, right? Because the worst case scenario is that, they don't work, but you know what does. And winning hockey games, losing hockey games, like that can happen on any given night. And I think it's really important to figure out what you have in your roster, right? Because one injury changes everything. Like you said, Mason Appleton, it's a line that we thought was going to be together till kingdom come. And when things are out of your control, they won't be, right? So it's really important to sort of see what you have, and maybe that means giving Cole Perfetti more responsibility. And all of a sudden, if he plays with someone different, if he plays with Kyle Connor, like he did in the year with Pierre-Luc Dubois, and they are awesome, it's like, okay, maybe Cole Perfetti's not the problem. Maybe it's XYZ other thing going on right now, right? Like, I think this is the time to figure that stuff out, because you need to know what you have in your own guys.
Yep. And I can get behind that take. I also think with Cole Perfetti, I used to also be in the camp of like, he's a top six player. You can't put him on the third line with Lowry. And then fourth line is a little too low for like a 22-year-old first round pick who you really want to ascend. I think we're past the point of that. Like I just think at 23 years old with nearly 200 games played, if you're playing bad enough to be on the fourth line, you're playing bad enough to be on the fourth line. Like, I
I
don't
think
think
my thing is I just you're not like it's almost like a weird fall off for me because I think he would be really poor on the fourth line, just in the sense of Cole Perfetti plays his best hockey when he can complement other guys. I'm sorry, you wanted him to feed pucks to Rasmus Kapari and Morgan Barron, two like chronically poor finishers. Like, it's not gonna work, you know? So it's like I'd almost rather see him not play than play on that fourth line, right? Like he brings a different style of gamer, right? And that's, you know, you start looking at I'm not going to call him a one-trick pony, but that's the whole thing with the one-trick pony is that, you know, is it worth it to keep Patrick Laine on your hockey team and never play him at 5-on-5 just to send him out on the power play and score a bajillion goals? Probably, because he's that good at that thing. Cole Perfetti just needs to take another step, in my opinion, to be that good at that thing to justify keeping him in XYZ role in spite of his flaws, right?
Okay. Yeah. I'm with you on that. I mean, I don't know if they'll do it. I think they will if this continues into the LA Colorado back to back next week, because at that point you're playing two playoff teams, Western Conference teams, and the results will need to be there for the Jets if they want to end this 3-game losing streak. They get Nashville on Tuesday, who they just beat. We'll see if they can do it again. But Cole Perfetti in that second line and Nikolai Ehlers and whoever's in the middle, Lowry or Nemestikov, they need to get going. I think that's why they made the switch last night. Scott O'Neill mentioned that it was, you know, they wanted to get guys playing and wanted to get them puck touches, but I don't know. I think that they did it because Ehlers and Perfetti simply aren't going at 5-on-5 right now. I know Ehlers got the deflection goal late, but they aren't really generating a lot. So let's get to trending up, trending down, Lyss. Let's do it. We are going to debut actually another segment on today's show. We're bringing up a new one. Yes, super excited to debut that. So stick around later on in the episode. But let's get you trending up, trending down. This is, you know the drill at this point. A segment where we outline who is trending up or down for the Winnipeg Jets over the past week. The rules are simple. Both Lyss and I will pick a player who has been trending up or down, and we cannot repeat an answer that has been said, and we can't repeat an answer that was said last week. Last week, we picked Connor and Scheifele for trending up, and Niederreiter and Appleton for trending down. So those players are off the board. The most important rule of this segment is that all of you who have joined us here live on YouTube must hit the chat room and let us know your picks for trending up or trending down. Lyss, I'm actually going to go first because I did not watch many of the games.
What happened to
week.
Chivalry? Jeez.
I did not watch many of the games this week. So I'm just going to take Alex Iafallo for trending up. He jumped up for Mason Appleton, who's out with the injury, to that third line with Lowry and Niederreiter. Scored a big goal late in the Anaheim game, and I thought looked really good last night as well against the Detroit Red Wings. So Alex Iafallo in a bigger role. I'm going to keep it simple. He scored some goals this week. He looked good alongside Lowry and Niederreiter. I know some people want to see that line be the long-term line as well, even when Mason Appleton returns. But I will say Alex Iafallo for trending up. I thought he had a great game on Thursday night against Anaheim, and then last night as well against Detroit. Who's your trending up pick of the week?
Yeah, I'm going to give mine to Dylan DeMello. This is a player that I've been pretty hard on this year, and I think just in terms of the 41-game sample, I think we're seeing better hockey from Dylan DeMello. Obviously, he missed a little bit of time this week with some form of injury. I don't know. Frankly, I missed that game. I did not watch, but I think generally speaking, Dylan DeMello has looked a little bit better to me. I'm not saying he's full form, you know, the player he was 2 years ago necessarily, but in terms of you know, the whole point of the segment is improving, you know, or trending down a little bit. And I think Dylan DeMello has looked better in this past little stretch of hockey than he has, you know, earlier in the season, which is a really, really encouraging sign. While this decor has been a little bit depleted, he's stepped up in a big way, in my opinion. And I think that him playing well, you know, Morrissey, I thought had a good game yesterday. And part of that, yes, Morrissey did have a couple of different partners over the course of the game, but the two of them are looking a bit more like that vintage pairing that we know and love so much from, you know, Josh Morrissey's Vezina campaigns. My God, it's early. His Norris campaigns, right? So I think that Dylan DeMello gets my trending up this week.
I like that pick. That pairing has been really good over the past month, Morrissey and DeMello. We talk all the time about how the Jets have had to go down to 5 defensemen in all of these games. That pairing has been stable, let's say, and that is a big thing for the Jets defense core right now, surprisingly.
Perhaps the bar is on the floor, but stable we will take right now.
Yeah, exactly. trending down, I'll let you go first as well. I mean, we just talked about Cole Perfetti, if you want to take that one.
Never.
Or
Never.
maybe
Screw you.
maybe go off the board a little bit. Go first for trending down.
Yeah, for my turning down, I'm going to go with Vlad Nemestikov. I think that this is probably not like a super outlandish pick either. Maybe a little bit of a lazy pick just based on kind of the demotion promotion that we have going on down the middle with the Winnipeg Jets right now. But this is a player that I think is starting to fall into a little bit of a Mason Appleton camp to me, in the sense of, when the season starts, I look at him and I'm like, okay, you are punching above your weight class right now. Like, Mason Appleton should not be stapled to the third line, and no questions asked, bona fide NHLer or third line NHLer in the most meaningful minutes on the team NHLer.
Right.
Vlad Nemestikov should not be your lock on 2C, whatever. And then they start the season really well, and I'm like, okay, my bad. Sorry. You swag too different. I was not familiar with your game. My bad. And then the graduation goggles come off a little bit, and you take a look and you're like, okay, maybe I had some validity to what I was thinking earlier to start the season. Yes, they really kind of came out flying out the gate and looked really good. They kind of both followed that line of thinking for me. And Nemestikov, I think, has struggled a little bit in the last little bit. This is not the second line center on a playoff performing Stanley Cup contending team. It's not. And so the demotion, it's hard to call it that, because again, that Lowry line has been so good, but Lowry is the Lowry line, right? So as soon as you take him off, it loses the impact of being the Lowry line. So Vlad Nemestikov gets my trending down this week. I think that he might be a little bit banged up as well. We talked about, even when he was still playing on that second line, Cole Perfetti was taking draws in the what game was that? Was it the Colorado
Anaheim game? I believe that was the Anaheim game.
Yeah, so, like, there are a couple things like that would maybe lead you to believe that he could be perhaps banged up. But regardless, banged up or not, if you're still playing in the lineup and still playing your role, output is output. So he gets my turning down for this week.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, on Vlad Nemestikov. And that's part of the discussion as well with Cole Perfetti that we just talked about. Trending down this condensed schedule. Yes, trending up, more home games and more rest for the Winnipeg Jets this next week. My trending down pick, we already talked about Cole Perfetti enough. I'm not gonna
can't rag on him anymore.
Well, yeah, we'll leave it another week maybe for Cole Perfetti and discuss next week. But my trending down is going to be Ville Heinola. In all of these opportunities where defensemen are getting hurt left, right, and center in front of him, and he's in the lineup, like you said, last night he played his 13th game, career best. It's just not working for Ville Heinola. And last night we saw, he had some good shifts later, but he let Alex DeBrincat kind of get inside positioning on that goal that ended up being the difference in the game. And you just can't have that happen. There was a few bad turnovers as well from Ville Heinola. I know he had the good offensive kind of spurts and a good offensive shift here and there, but I just don't think that that's enough, because Ville Heinola is letting players into the front of the net right now a little too easily for my liking, and turning the puck over a little too much as well. And again, every time you mention Ville Heinola or Logan Stanley, people are going to bring up the other one. This has nothing to do with Logan Stanley. Ville Heinola in a vacuum has not been what Jets fans had hoped when he got this opportunity, and when all of these injuries had happened in front of him. I would say people were expecting more. I was expecting more when, he could maybe take that opportunity. I know start of training camp, he was supposed to be with Miller, and he was supposed to be in the lineup as a regular, and that obviously didn't happen because of his own injury. But there's been so many injuries, and he still hasn't really taken that role. And last night was one of his poor performances this season. So I'm going to go Ville Heinola trending down. Do you have any objections, Lyss, to that?
No, but damn, that's our first double up for the trending down segment. The first guy to ever make the segment twice. So maybe not looking so hot for Ville Heinola right now. But listen, I think you're absolutely right on that. He had one moment yesterday where Connor Hellebuyck made a nice, easy, clean save because Ville Heinola tied up the stick perfectly. And I was like, see, that's what I know he can do. And then, famous last words, right? I think that's a player, you nailed it. And I try to defend him a little bit to start off the show, and I stand by what I said. But yeah, it's a player that need to see a little bit more from. That's for sure.
Yes. And we'll leave it at that. Okay, so we do have another segment coming up. But first, I want to talk about, and stick around, it's going to be fun. The chat is very involved in it, so stick around. It's going to be a good one. But Lyss, today is the gold medal game for the World Junior Championships. Canada obviously, yeah, Canada obviously bowed out quite early. And that's gonna probably dominate our little mini discussion here. But USA Finland in the gold medal game. We haven't talked since the Canada Czechia game where Czechia scored with, I want to say 46, 47, 43, something like that, seconds left to take a 4-3 lead. Where are you at with today's gold medal game first? And then maybe we can talk about Canada falling short in the quarterfinals to Czechia in the final minute for the second straight year.
Yeah, go Suomi. I have never said anything about the homeland of Patrick Laine Nation. It will be a cold day in hell before I cheer for the U.S. in any kind of international play. Screw those guys. Am I right, guys? But no, I mean, I'm gonna tune in to watch today's game for sure. I think it'll be nice to see. I would love to see Finland win a medal. I also would have loved to have seen Sweden win a gold. Obviously, we know about their medal curse, and in terms of winning this tournament, even though they show a performance of sheer and utter dominance year after year. But besides the point, I always get excited when, you can't script these tournaments. The USA making it to the gold medal game is not surprising. I probably could have told you that a couple weeks ago. But outside of that, I think it's been a little bit like I've been locked in to the tournament, which is not something I thought I was going to be, because I just kind of thought there's going to be some throwaway games here, some good games, the ones that I expected. And it's been fun. So it's nice to see when other nations outside of Canada, and as of late, the US, medal and perform really well.
Yeah. And if taking off the red and white go Canada glasses for a second, the tournament has been incredible. You've seen massive upsets. Latvia beat Canada, of course. You've seen parity with like Canada beating Finland, but then Finland making it all the way to the gold medal game and beating Sweden in overtime. Like there's been some great moments. And even the typical bottom feeders like Germany, like Latvia, like the Swiss, those teams are really impressing me, and I thought have looked pretty good in their games as well. Obviously, Latvia beat Canada, but in their other games as well, I've liked how they've played. So it's been really, really great tournament, and I'm excited for this game tonight with the gold medal USA Finland. And yeah, I mean, all the quotes coming out from the Canadian. Maybe that's for another time. Maybe that's for another time with all the
I feel like did we kind of like rip into them a little bit a few weeks or like last week? I feel like I probably did.
I think so, but it's because but since then they lost to the US on New Year's Eve and lost to Czechia.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. But it's just funny to be like, it's very much I told you so vibes, right? It's like we knew exactly what was going to happen. Everyone said that the moment they released their invite list for camp. We're like, okay, this is how it's going to be, right? And like that's insane. And it is easy to speak in hindsight, but we were never speaking in hindsight. We were like, guys, look what's going to happen. And then look what did.
Yeah. And it's like last year they couldn't score a goal and it burned them in the medal round as well. And now this year it's like, oh, they can't score a goal because they didn't take their most talented offensive players. What a shock. And then like you see Dave Cameron get up there. Do you have any regrets? No. Never played Carson Rakoff and Porter Martone together, like the most dynamic duo in the OHL. Like, I don't know. It's just puzzling. I mean, Hockey Canada is supposed to act like Hockey Canada. Like they're the favorite. They're the best, but they took players to grind the other team down. And I saw a comment that was like, if Canada had to play Czechia in a 7-game series, they'd probably wear them down and win in 6. But this is not a 7-game series. This is single elimination, and you need to take.
That's exactly it. This tournament. This tournament is won by scoring goals. It's been won by scoring goals since the dawn of time.
But did you know that other teams are trying to? Because that's what the Canadian GM said. They're not the only team trying Canada, actually, believe it or not.
It's insane.
When I heard that, I went, you know what? Maybe we're being too hard on Hockey Canada. Maybe this is acceptable. Back-to-back quarterfinals losses. I didn't realize that every other team was trying like Latvia. I didn't realize it. So, yeah, fair.
I have never been more thankful for the Winnipeg Jets and whatever. Like, if I had to sit in the media of that, I think I would have I don't even know what I would have done. Like the answers from both Cameron and the decision makers, some of those responses were just ridiculous. Canceling all the practices. These guys are tired. As opposed to everybody else in the tournament who is eager and raring to go and not exhausted. Like, what?
You're at home.
Like, it's
You're
just
at
so
home.
much for thee and not for me, right? Which is the worst attitude that you could possibly have in
Mhm.
sports. It's the same way that, yesterday, kudos to Josh Morrissey. I kind of like some of his answers, but when these guys, they bring up, 5-8, whatever, Josh Morrissey did kind of backtrack it a bit and be like, yeah, and he's different tough schedules, and every team's got tough schedules, because every team plays 5 and 8 games at some point during the season. Like, I can't have a lot of patience for circumstances that befall you that also befall every other team in the league. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. They seem to figure it out. Why can't you?
Yeah, and you're at home. It's in Canada. Like, everyone had to travel from across the world, and you're the one exhausted, not practicing. I don't get that. And these are, again, teenagers. This is a U20 tournament. These guys have been playing hockey since they were born, and to be exhausted after a 3-2 overtime loss to Latvia is really interesting. This comment right here. There's been a lot of this, not only from the Canadian decision makers, the head coach, but just fans in general who are like, well, the rest of the world is caught up. It's like, no, it hasn't. If you leave all of your best scorers at home, you don't play your best players, you scratch Porter Martone and Carson Rakoff, who should be regulars in the top 6, they're not going to dominate. Like, that's not just a, oh, well situation. Like, Hockey Canada is still the best, and they'll still have the best team on paper going into the 2026 World Juniors. Even with the roster that they brought, they were still the favorite to win the tournament. All the experts, Scott Wheeler, Corey Proman, picked them to medal either silver or gold, even with the roster. So it's not like, oh, they missed some of the picks, and that is the difference between Canada and Latvia. It's like, no, that you're still the best on paper, right? So they'll have another dominant team in 2026, and we'll see what they can do. I think that's the only way we can leave it. All right, it's 10 o'clock.
Thought I got over this, but now I think it's time to go leave some mean comments on Easton Cowan's Instagram.
Okay, whoa, yeah, that is loser behavior for sure. But yeah,
I called it. What did I call it earlier this week? Jobless is what I called it earlier this week. It's
right.
Jobless behavior.
And people will always say that, and they're correct. It's like, don't bully the teenagers because it's not their fault, and it's not. But
have you ever seen those things, or people are like, I like Taylor Swift, but like not in the same way that other people do. Like, I like her a normal amount. I like her an informed enough amount, like a cool enough amount. That's me with like my opinion on like World Juniors kids. I'm like, I'm the only person with a normal and rational opinion on, because some people are like, oh, they've never done anything wrong in their lives. They're perfect, sweet little boys. How dare you get upset with them? And it's like, no, they're there to compete, and you can get upset when they don't compete. But then on the other side of the pendulum, you have people being like, you just let down this nation in the biggest upsets, and whatever. It's like, I'm the only person actually who has a super normal and rational opinion on this. So
right. And I love the tweets of the people like saying, make sure you don't bully the kids, make sure you direct all your anger at Dave Cameron and the decision makers. It's like, what do you think we're doing? Yeah, we're mad at Dave Cameron and the decision makers. And
like, I don't know. And I think like, well, first and foremost, like, if you're like, oh yeah, you shouldn't have like a verbal abuse onslaught towards a 20-year-old, but you should towards like a 50-year-old. Like, I don't know. It's like, maybe we shouldn't be verbally abusing anyone who doesn't even know who we are. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know. There's just so much. Sure. Again, everyone is just acting weird about it. I'm like, I'm normal. The rest of you should try it too.
Right, of course. Well, that's enough of my rant on the I wasn't in Winnipeg this week, so I was just kind of following along with the Jets in Canada, and that was something else. So I had to talk about that. But anyways, we are launching a new segment today, and it's already past 10, so we got to get to it quickly. But this is a segment that I kind of came up with because I see a ton of great questions in the chat throughout the show, and we plan our shows pretty extensively in terms of the topics that we want to cover. So it's tough sometimes to bring up a great question that I see in the chat and fully kind of change the conversation and talk about that, because we have all these topics that we want to talk about, right? But this segment is going to change that. I've seen the questions all show long. Let's get to it. This is one burning question, a segment where we throw it to you, the chatters here who have joined us here live on a Sunday morning, for any question that you may have regarding the Winnipeg Jets. We are going to attempt to rapid fire through these questions. So drop your question in the chat below right now. And hey, while you're down there, hit the like button. We would really appreciate it. it helps us let YouTube know that we are putting out some great content, and maybe it finds some extra Jets fans as well with the search engine optimization, the SEO that you hear all the time. So drop your questions down below. We will attempt to rapid fire through them as we wrap the show here. And this is the new segment, One Burning Question, to go with our trending up, trending down. We're adding so many segments to the show. So much fun. I'm not usually going to start any of these segments going forward, but because it's the first one, Lyss, what is your concern level with the Winnipeg Jets on a scale of 1 to 10? 3 straight losses. 10 being very concerned.
I was going to say,
yeah.
I was about to answer, but then you said 3 straight losses, and I'm going to slap you on the wrist because my concern level has nothing to do with the 3 losses. The 3 losses, these 3 losses, they played better hockey than they did in games 2, 3, and 4 of the season against Chicago, Minnesota, and whoever game 4 was against, right? Like, whatever, it's fine. I'm going to go with like a 4.
Okay.
Like pretty middle of the pack in terms of concern level, right? Like, I think we know what the issues are here, and I think the team seems to be somewhat aware of what the issues are. So I think I'm going to go with a 4. Okay. What are you going to go with?
Sweet. I'm going to go in that range too. I'm going to go with a 3. Not as concerned. I'm still concerned about the 5-on-5 scoring. And you know what? I'll just dive right into this question because Choices TK drops a great one here. Only 3 wins when they don't score a power play goal, and second in the league for percentage of goals from the power play at 26.9%. That is some great, deep dive analysis right there. How concerning is the lack of 5-on-5 scoring? This is something that I've been concerned about all season long. I mean, they're not generating enough. They're not scoring enough at 5-on-5. The power play is really making up for it. And it's something that last year they were so good at 5-on-5. And the narrative down the stretch was, oh, well, that's, where the majority of the hockey's played. That's the sustainable way to win. And they got bounced in 5. So I think as long as you lean into your strengths, in terms of like a playoff view of things, as long as you lean into your strengths, you're going to turn out just fine. But obviously would like to see some more 5-on-5 scoring. Lyss, I'll let you answer this one from Dart Skater. And it's a really good question. Is there a prospect that is untouchable for a trade this playoff run? I say no.
No, never.
Yeah,
there's never a prospect that's untouchable in
agree.
any situation. And I would venture to say there's never a player that's untouchable. You could trade Connor McDavid. You could trade Connor McDavid and still win the trade if you bring in XYZ pieces. It's unlikely to happen because usually I am of the mind that whoever walks away with the best player wins the trade. But generally speaking, like I believe that there are players. You should always be willing and able to move guys. It has to be for the right return for your team. It has to be. But besides the point, prospects, absolutely. You could trade every single prospect on the Winnipeg Jets right now. And I'd venture to say you almost should. I don't know. I would be more inclined to trade some of the prospects that the Winnipeg Jets have than draft capital right now, just because I don't know. I think generally speaking, I don't know why we don't see more prospect trades when they're a little bit more of a not sure thing, but they're a bit more calculated than pick trades and stuff like that. Sure. My answer to Darth Skinner's question is no. They should be putting Brad Lambert, Colby Barlow, everybody out there.
Yeah. I agree. There's no prospect that's untouchable. I would say that there are players untouchable. I would not go that far.
Like it's a bit of an aggressive take, but it's more to no. But Connor Hellebuyck, you're telling me that you wouldn't trade Connor Hellebuyck for Connor McDavid and a couple other things, like
sure, but like that's
it's a moot point because it'll never happen, sort of thing. But I just think it's a mentality that's important. That like I'd rather overcorrect that way than overcorrect in the sense of like, oh, but like this guy's important to the team and like. Fair. Iafalo's been really good. Like, no, like I can't. So I'd rather swing the pendulum too far into the direction of like trade everybody if you have to kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Ben Howard asks, who's your favorite Jet to deal with from a media standpoint? Gabe Vilardi has always given me a good time of day. Josh Morrissey as well. Nino Niederreiter, always very respectful. I mean, all of the players in interviews are always very respectful. Those guys, especially though. Dylan DeMello is also great. But yeah, that's my rapid fire answer to those questions. Most of them are very, very good. Cole Perfetti. Yeah.
Cole Perfetti's the best specifically for like facial expressions and stuff too. Like I think he's so funny. Like they'll like when they'll like tell him something he doesn't know or something like that, or ask him a question that's like a bit odd. He'll be like, oh, I don't know. And it's quite funny.
Vilardi's hilarious as well because you'll say, here, you'll give a softball question like, you guys were great on the power play tonight. What did you see from that unit? And he'll go, well, I don't know. What was our percentage? Where did we go? And you'll have to be like, 2 for 5. Like, you'll have to have the answers ready for Gabe Velarde. And I love it because he's like, I don't know, you tell me. And it's great.
What a king.
Tom asks, will the Jets make a hockey trade before the Four Nations tournament? Four Nations tournament.
That's a really
February
good
12th.
question.
Yeah. The trade deadline is early March. If I had to guess, I would say no.
I'm also going to say no.
Okay, sweet.
I think it's kind of atypical of contending teams, whatever. And I think recency bias, last year they tried that with Sean Monahan, and Sean Monahan was good. I was a lot less married to that trade, and I was a lot less impressed by the results than a lot of other people were. You know, people were like, oh, he was money on the power play. Power play still let them down when it mattered. So like that's not a good enough reason for me whatsoever. And that one, it was kind of like a tried and failed. It was, again, do I think the Winnipeg Jets should go back and not make that trade? I don't know if I'd go that far or anything like that. All that's to say, that was an early trade last year, and it's not like it had crazy benefits. So I don't think they're going to try super, super hard to force something if it's not there. So I'm going to lean no as well.
Yeah, and sticking with the trade deadline, the acquisition potentially of the Winnipeg Jets, what is the most pressing issue? A 2C or top defenseman? That's what Comet asks. I've been saying, even since like the second week of the season, it's a defenseman this year. I mean, the past couple years, it's been 2C. This year, I think it's very clearly a defenseman, especially with Dylan DeMello not looking at that top pairing level. If you agree, let's quickly move on. Who would be your perfect second line center fit for the Jets? I'm going to say Brock Nelson as a player. He's a pending UFA. He's 33, big, plays with size, scores a lot of goals. Who's your perfect second line fit? Connor McDavid?
Sidney Crosby.
Sidney Crosby.
You say Connor McDavid, you're like some throwaway dumb answer. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna give you another dumb one too. Yeah. No, I think someone like Brock Nelson, Elias Pettersson. No, Mark Scheifele, because Elias Pettersson is my ideal one. No, just kidding. I think in terms of like who's available right now, who some of the conversations are, I'm gonna go with Brock Nelson as well.
What did you think of the throwing the equipment penalty? Gregory was asked.
Dustin Byfuglien got the same penalty like 8 years ago, didn't he? I feel like I remember that so well. He picked up a second stick and tried to give it to someone, so he was carrying 2 sticks at one point. It was so funny. It's a call. My favorite part about it was that over the course of the rest of the game, there were guys like flicking gloves to one another and other things, and I'm like, careful, because you know what happened here. It is a call. I've seen it before. It's just really funny to like look at the box score and be like, throwing the equipment is actually what it's like labeled as. Hilarious, iconic, but kind of a dumb thing. It's like he was so clearly not like trying to like dual fence with the sticks to try and score a goal. Like, no, it's like kind of goofy, but whatever.
I once picked up a penalty when I was like 8 years old for throwing a stick at like a player had an empty net, and I like threw my stick across the ice to try and like knock the puck away. Got a penalty for it. So now for the rest of my life, when I see a stick,
I thought that was an auto goal in the NHL.
Yeah. In the NHL, it'd be an auto goal. I mean, I don't know.
You're like, yeah, well, I wasn't playing in the NHL. Believe it or not,
8 years old. Yeah, I don't know if the ref who was like maybe,
and your refs
17.
were probably like 14, being like,
I don't know. Yeah, what does the book say? They brought the little book out. No. Who's your top trade target for the playoff run? If there's if we're going defenseman, I'd say Mackenzie Weegar, Rasmus Anderson.
I was going to say Rasmus Anderson. So yeah, the Calgary Flames. That's my pick. Yeah,
exactly.
Mackenzie Weegar would be a stud too.
Is Comet your favorite chatter? I'm going to plead the fifth. Everyone is
my fifth.
Yeah. Let's go on. What is Ehlers' overall playoff record? I mean, it's not great. He doesn't put up a lot of points. Would Jonathan Taves be a good fit for the Jets?
I want to go back to that one super quickly though. The Ehlers playoff record. This is the opinion that I've held for a long time, and I will continue to hold until I'm proven otherwise. If you think Ehlers is not good enough in the playoffs, if that's your bar, nobody on the Winnipeg Jets has been good enough in the playoffs in terms of longevity and score. Other than like if we go post-COVID, which I'm sorry, you kind of have to. You can't really look at the Mark Scheifele of 8 years ago and be like, yeah, this is the sample I want to plant my flag in, whatever. Like, no. Ehlers, I understand why people kind of give him a hard time, but everybody in the Winnipeg Jets deserves a hard time for their playoff performance in the last few years. There are no exceptions to that rule for me.
Okay. I'm with you on that. I'd still, obviously, Ehlers, the raw point totals are concerning, of course, but I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Career best is like 62 points. Like, you give him 5 games and he's got like 1 point in the playoffs. Like, that's pretty, like, I don't know,
Fair.
like that's just like a random kind of lower end sample. Like that's not overly far from the mean that you should be expecting. Like,
I agree. Yeah. Nathan asks, what's the all-in trade? I think a lot of people would say Elias Pettersson, but I don't really see that. I think Mackenzie Weegar would be the all-in trade because he's
I
got
agree.
a long-term contract. Like he's under contract for a long time still, would be that top pairing guy with Josh Morrissey. He's an elite defenseman. I don't know. That would be my all. And I'm assuming it would take prospects and picks to do it. So I think that's like a push all the chips into the table kind of thing. Real quick, because it's 10:13. We're going way long today, but this segment is great. Getting the questions. Would Jonathan Taysford be a good fit for the Jets? Me personally, I know a lot of people have spoken on this. I think if he's coming in as the fourth line center, I don't hate it. I mean, he's 36. He hasn't played in 2 years. He just started skating. Obviously, he's going to say that he wants to come back into the NHL, but to think he's going to come back and be anything like the player he was 10 years ago when the Blackhawks were winning Stanley Cups, I don't see it. So if he's the fourth line center, sure. If not, nah. Where are you at with that?
Yeah, I'm going to say no on that one too.
Okay.
I think, no.
Okay. Sweet. I don't know. I'm way less enthusiastic about that than everyone else. I'll just say that. But anyways, let's get out of here. That was one burning question. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and dropping a question down below. I wanted to get this segment up because you guys always ask such great questions at like 9-10 in the morning, and it's tough for us to get to it. So this is a way for you to drop the questions and we will rapid fire answer them. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you, Lyss, for joining me on this Sunday morning. Earlier this week, I was going to say later this week. That makes no sense. It's Sunday. Earlier this week, you launched a fun new project, and I want to give you kind of the floor to kind of talk about it here on WST Sunday Live. So fill people in on what the project is and what they can expect moving forward.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I did. That was an exciting thing I launched on January 2nd, letting everyone know that I'm starting a new kind of podcast project, YouTube project, whatever you want to call it. Same sort of vibe as this, where you can watch it, listen to it wherever you prefer to consume your media. But it's based on kind of my TikTok brand that I sort of like to post with, called Chell Chit Chat, which apparently I didn't know. Not everyone knew that Chell was a word. Like my mom and people I was talking to were like, oh my gosh, what does that even mean? I thought it was just like a fun little word. Chell is short for NHL and PWHL. Like it's the shortened acronym there, but it's going to be a 10 episode project where I'm going to sit down with a bunch of different women who have influential roles in hockey, athletes, advocates, industry leaders, influencers, different people who are, changing the way that hockey is viewed, worked in, played, all these different things. So some of my guests they work in media, they work in jersey design, they work in the medical field. There are so many different industries that are being represented, but it's all about just different women in hockey and some of the different opportunities that exist. I found that over the course of the last few years, as I've gotten more involved in hockey, as I've learned more, there are so many jobs, there are so many ways to get involved that you don't know, right? So I think that's kind of what I want to bring to light with this project, and just highlight some really cool voices that I've been super privileged to meet over the last few years. A lot of really, really cool women in hockey. So I wanted to platform that and kind of get it all in one place, develop a bit of a resource for people who are interested in supporting women in hockey who are aspiring to build their own careers and all that sort of stuff.
Well, that's super exciting. Thank you for sharing. I know a lot of people in chat will be fired up to check it out as well. Chell Chit Chat. Tyson saying, I was waiting for your NHL 25 takes. That the Chell is how I always describe the NHL video
I
game.
know. I was like, that's actually where I think the name sort of started from.
Yeah.
Oh my God, are you going to get like a copyright infringement? I was like, I think it's just a slang thing. I don't think NHL 25, like I don't think EA uses the word Chell.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't think so either. But yeah, that's going to be awesome. Thank you so much. And everyone who joined us here in chat, thank you so much for staying with us. I mean, it's 10:16. We're going way long. If you enjoyed the show today, make sure you hit the like button down below. Helps YouTube know that we're putting out some great content. Maybe it'll reach a few extra Jets fans as well. And we will see you next Sunday on WST Sunday Live. Maybe Lyss and I have a deep dive coming soon as well. So stay tuned for that. But next Sunday, the Winnipeg Jets play Tuesday against Nashville, Friday against the Los Angeles Kings, and then Saturday against the Colorado Avalanche. So we will break it all down next Sunday on WST Sunday Live. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next Sunday. Have a great week. Enjoy your Sunday and enjoy the games this week down at Canada Life Center. See ya.